welcome. We're glad that you guys are here. Today we're chords of 4 instead of just, 2 chords.
This is true.
Like we were episode 2.
That is true.
That was really good, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That was fun. We had a great time.
It's been good. Are you officially welcoming us?
Well, I was trying.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know. I'm so bad because I'm like, wait, are we really?
Hey,
doing the
let's
thing?
do this thing.
Okay.
I think we're ready. Let's officially welcome.
I like it.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome to
Glad to be here.
yes,
Glad to be here.
our next episode of Stranded. I think we should start with introductions because while a couple of us are familiar and maybe all of us, let's just all say who we are today. So I'm Amber.
I'm Danny.
Elena.
Donna.
And so we have Elena and Donna joining us today, and both of these incredible women have a plethora of knowledge about homeschooling and schooling at home or at-home learning, all the things that are, those things that are this one and the same right now. And so that's why we have you guys here to answer some questions that, some of us, I and people at home have been wondering about as we are all embarking on this virtual learning thing in different arenas right now.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I would just love to hear, who are your people? How many of them are there? How many kids do you have? And what have you been doing?
Sure.
I'll let you go first with that big question.
With the Army?
Yes.
It's funny, my 6-year-old always tells people we have 8 kids. And I have to correct him, like, no, baby, there are 8 people in our family. We have 6 kids. Like, please don't give me more than I have.
Right. It's a lot already.
So we have 6. Our youngest is in 1st grade, and our oldest is in his 1st year of college. So, and we have 5 boys and 1 girl. It's kind of squashed sort of in the middle there. And we have been doing kind of everything from homeschooling to private to public to 2-day academies, 1-day academies. So our oldest was our guinea pig. So
I like that.
Awesome.
and
So
he made
you've had
it. He made it
So
successfully.
he's in college.
At college. I'm
Doing
done.
the thing. Love that.
Well, let's see. I only have 2 by comparison, and I'm done with 1. So I have 1 that's a freshman in college this year, and then 1 that's a senior in high school. And we have pretty well homeschooled all but 2 years. And so, and full-time. So we've had a couple years that we joined a community, but for the most part, we have been solo, just us.
good.
Let me just start off by saying it's
14
so
years.
crazy that your kids are even this old.
I know.
I just remember Jonah, who's in college now. He was just such a little guy hanging out, doing the Rubik's Cube.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, the
I
transit
know.
cubers.
Yes.
Our transit cubers.
They- so
They're either
fast.
doing card tricks or, I don't know.
know.
Rubik's Cube is really entertaining.
Didn't you go through a magic phase too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so good. So many talents. All your kids
Yes.
are so talented.
Yeah.
That's good.
No.
They just stick to one thing.
Yeah. Just the plethora of knowledge. It's okay.
But that's not how it works.
No.
No. I think my oldest is I call him the modern day Renaissance man. So I give him a good title for his desire
that.
to learn all things about
That's
all
right.
things and then move on to something for all things.
There's nothing wrong with being well-rounded.
No.
Having many.
No.
So I'm really excited to be talking with you guys today about homeschooling. But before we get started, I felt like we really needed to define the term because there's so much of
That's
that
good.
word homeschool out there right now.
Yeah.
And so for everyone listening to really understand what in the world we're even talking about
I like
and not get upset or not think, well, I'm confused. Let's
Yeah.
just talk about, in your mind, let's just throw out, what do we think homeschool is?
So I like to tell people the difference between homeschooling, virtual schooling, or schooling at home. Homeschooling is parent-led instruction in all the areas that they're learning with control over what they're learning and how they're learning it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's
actually.
a good description.
Yeah.
So
Is that where you're
homeschooling.
at, Elena? Same
Yeah.
line of thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I would say my definition looks like too. So, yeah, just so we're on the same page. I love that. So with that said, you want to talk about curriculum?
Yeah. I'm super interested. And just real quick before we get into that, you also said so homeschool. The 3 terms you used that we've used so far are
Yep.
homeschooling, schooling from home, and at home learning. Right? Is that what you just
I said homeschooling, virtual schooling, and schooling at home.
Okay.
So there are programs, you know, that you can, like the K-12, where you can
Yes.
do full-time, school at home, virtually, right?
Right.
That's your program. Or what our public school friends are going through right now
Right.
is school at home.
Yes.
That's not your ideal. That's not your game plan. That's just the season that you're in. And so
It's not
you're
parent-led.
That's not parent-led. You're just schooling at home.
Yes.
Yeah.
School curriculum that parents are hopefully encouraging the children through, and
right.
Yes.
sitting,
Yes.
learning coach.
Even
more.
though you may feel like you are completely hands-on the whole,
Yes.
hour.
Yes.
I was at my hairdresser's house yesterday.
Yeah.
And she is trying to just do my hair, and her kids are coming in like every 5 minutes. She's like, this is what my whole day is. They're coming in, asking me questions, and I don't know, so I have to sit there and like, well, that's different. That's, yes, you're involved and completely hands-on, but it's still not parent-led.
Parent-led. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's a good explanation of the different ones. That's good. Anything else that you would add to that, Elaine? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You agree with that? Good stuff. So you mentioned curriculums earlier. So what I'm curious, obviously with us parents that have our kids in public school, but we are virtually schooling at home, we have a curriculum that they are working through. How is that different than what curriculums have you guys worked with from the homeschooling realm that you've enjoyed or that you maybe have stuck with, just for families out there that are also homeschooling and from the parent-led perspective?
That's a loaded
It's a lot.
homeschooling question.
See,
That is
I don't
a
know.
lot.
I'm not homeschooled, so this is information that I
Now,
need.
I will
I'm
say,
so
when
curious.
you go to these, what are they, the big
The conferences,
yeah.
homeschool
conventions, they
yeah.
have rows and rows and rows of vendors.
The whole convention hall. It's like
Selling-
100 booths.
So
at
how do
least.
you
Curriculum.
decide? Let me maybe just pause that and say, how in the world do you decide what curriculum works for your family, or even is it an individual choice for your kids?
When I started, my kids were so young that it was more picking a curriculum that I could do, that I was like, is this something that I could see myself being able to grasp and implement and do at home? And then as the kids began to get older, I could see, does this work for their learning style? Are they engaged? Are they thriving? Are they dreading it? And then kind of go from there and say, okay, what do we need to change up? What do we need to just scratch all together and try something different? So
Okay.
that's how it initially started out, was how can I survive?
Sure.
And then
Yeah.
it was, once I got a handle on it and was like, okay, I can do this. I think I can take on changing this subject or scrapping the whole, because you can buy a full kit that covers all the subjects, or you can buy different companies that do different specific subjects.
Okay.
And so
And
it
piece
really
it
is
together yourself
right,
that way. If
right.
You need to.
So depending on how your child is managing that curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ours was I can't say it was as neatly explained as that. Ours was the hot mess of what not to do.
I love it.
So, I'm a perfectionist and a box checker by nature. And so I thought, well, I'll just get like this curriculum that requires all of these things. And then I'm going to check all the boxes, whether my kid's sitting in front of me crying and screaming or not. And so that was probably our first 2 years of homeschool. And then that's when we took our break from homeschooling, was because I thought my oldest and I just did not get along. Well, it was really, I just had really unrealistic expectations for my kid. And so when we returned to homeschooling, after our 2 year break, it was more of a, by this time, what's their learning style, what's best for them, and picking and choosing based on what are his interests or what are the things he wants to try, or, where are we going with this? Like, what's the main drive for this school year? So sometimes, you're focused on one subject, or you're going to take a big family trip, and so we're going to study something different. So I just looked at it from a more freedom aspect than let's check the box, right?
And that was probably, I'm imagining, a better turning point for you,
yes.
for
Oh,
both of
yes.
you in that experience.
Well, some parents listening are probably thinking, well, this is why I don't homeschool, because I'm not qualified. I would go and pick the
So
wrong
true.
curriculum.
That's me.
I don't even know
Yes.
what to sign up for. I just like for someone to hand it to me, because otherwise I'm going to just ruin my whole kid's career. What would you say about that?
My first advice would be, don't homeschool unless you are feeling called to do it. If you're feeling a pull or a tug, then definitely pray about that. Ask God, okay, what is this tug that I'm having? What is this nudge that I keep feeling, that I keep rejecting, that I keep ignoring because I don't think I'm capable or qualified. So first of all, seek your husband, seek God, and then know the two things that really helped me when mine were little and I was just looking into this whole thing was, one is that you will never be able to teach them everything they need to know. No qualified, certified, educated teacher can. Your job is to instill a love for learning, and then they will teach themselves. Yeah. So they will go so much further and so faster than you can in your own strength if you just make everything inquisitive and make everything fun and make everything. And it's not as hard as it sounds. It's truly just saying, how is my child wired, and what can I do to help spark his curiosity or spark his, and finding that curriculum out there. And homeschool conferences are a great way to do that, to get your hands on the curriculum, look through it, talk to people who are trained in selling it and publishing it and knowing it, and they can say, yeah, this sounds like a good fit for your kid, or actually they're very honest, and they'll say, you know what, this doesn't sound like a good fit. If he's more tactile, you may want to go over to this curriculum and check that out. So they're very giving in that way. And then the other piece of advice that I loved was take it 1 year, one kid at a time. Don't feel like, well, if I make this decision today, that's it for the rest of his educational career, academic career. It's like what is work for our family this year may not work the following year. And so every year we reassess and we pray and we go through and say, how is my health, my emotional and relational health with my kids? How are my kids doing? How are our family dynamics doing? Are there any needs that they're not being met in the home? And would a different source of school, whether it's at an academy or a private school, by academy I say a 1-day academy or a 2-day academy, where it's like a what's it called when it's dual?
Like a hybrid.
Like a hybrid, yeah. Right. Or public or private. So just definitely don't feel like once you make a decision, you're stuck in that. It's
okay to reassess after
absolutely.
the year.
And like I said, my oldest did it all, and he was very resilient. And I was like, hey, so we've prayed about it, and we just feel like God is saying, right now you would get more, like you would be challenged more in your learning if you went to a 1-day academy where you could have class environment discussion conversations around the characters in the books that you're reading and around the metaphors of it and stuff that I just didn't have the time because I had so many other kids. And so it was, and he was, he was like, okay, so.
Right.
So.
Yeah. There's so many things I want to spring back and piggyback off of that, right? I was like, right. But you looked like you wanted to say something.
So our story was a little bit, I agree with Elena, it's a God-seeking thing, a God call, I think, truly on you feel this tug in your heart to make this decision. And that's where, when we originally started a homeschool, definitely felt like that was what I was supposed to do. And it was those 2-year gap where I disobeyed for a lack of not sounding too churchy, but it was one of those situations where I knew that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, and it got really hard. And so it was much more enjoyable, and it was a learning experience when we came back to homeschooling to realize that's really what he wanted me to do. And so I tried to always start every year with that in mind. Is this still what I'm supposed to be doing? And I never, ever got this clear no. And so we hung it in, and, when you can graduate one from high school, it's a celebration of sticking with it. And I would agree with Elena. I'm seeing we're a month into our freshman year, and he's thriving, and you're seeing all of the payoff, and you see what you did well. And
that's awesome.
You can step back and be like, okay, maybe I did something right.
Right.
Well, maybe I shouldn't be so hard on myself.
Yeah. And he's called me a couple times and said, thank you for this. Thank you for that. And
going back to your point of teaching them a love of learning,
yes.
If you can get that instilled, then they're set in college.
Yeah,
they can do that on their
What
own.
a difference that makes, rather than, sit here and learn this, than the battle, like you were mentioning earlier, just taking a step back and having that mindset. I could see how that would be a much, better way to come at it for both of you.
Yeah.
So that they learn to intrinsically that they
there's a
wanna learn.
lot of humility in it too. You have to be willing to admit when you don't know things. And Danny and I are both familiar with the term lead learner. So are you. Like you're your kid's lead learner. You're learning things right along with them. And so it's okay to say, I'm redeeming an education. I'm learning this for the first time. Maybe I don't have all the answers. And just being okay with that.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not even love to learn yourself, because I'm one of those people where it's like, I don't care. Like, I don't,
Right.
whatever. But I know that for my kids to be, if that's my goal for my kids, then how can I help set them up for success?
Right.
And so, like, one small example is instilling in them a love for reading, because I just don't enjoy reading. It's really hard for me. And so at a young age, I chose a curriculum that was very literary based. It was a lot of chapter books, a lot of fun adventure chapter books, and kind of like historical nonfiction and, historical fiction. And being able to turn reading into cuddling up by the fire, or sitting out on a blanket in the yard, or up in a tree, reading a chapter up in a tree, like whatever you want to do to make it fun. And then they have these great memories, their childhood memories of, and it just draws them to books. They're like, oh, like they have that love for books because we've
That's
made
neat.
made it different and fun. And
I think that's one of the benefits of being able to school at home, whether you're homeschooling or virtually schooling at home. Like a lot of us that our kids are in public school right now, is the freedom to kind of allow your child to learn in the best way that they, like exactly what you just mentioned. If you want to read, you need to read, go read outside, go read in a tree, find a place to snuggle up and read, giving them that freedom and kind of ownership over some areas like that is something we can all do as we're virtually learning and homeschooling. So I like
Absolutely.
that a lot.
sure.
Now, have you guys always homeschooled, or what made you even start homeschooling?
So, so both of my kids, 12 years of their education, only 2 of them have not been at home. Okay. So we did a half-day charter school for 2 years, and then quickly, and that was early elementary school, and then came back to homeschooling. So yeah, that's been it pretty much.
Okay, so it just wasn't a fit for you guys?
Was not, it was a grass is greener on the other side.
I
Like
get
the
that.
magic
Yeah.
of all your problems are solved if you do this, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
For us, my firstborn was turning 3, and moms were starting to put their kids into preschool, and I just wasn't ready to. I wanted to continue molding and shaping his heart and his character, and so I just thought, you know what, I can do ABCs and counting and all the preschool stuff. I can do that at home, So I just decided I was going to spend some time, a little bit longer, investing in him and pouring into his character and how to be kind and how to share and how to help around the house and how to serve and all those things that I wanted to make sure I was pouring into him. And then it just kind of, one year turned into the next, and then the next. And then when he got to, that was 3 years old, so then when he got to first grade, so we did preschool stuff for a couple years and then kindergarten, and then once he got to first grade, I was pregnant with my 4th in 4 years, and I was exhausted, and we had just moved and trying to get settled, and
I'm exhausted just hearing
Just,
that.
can we pause on that for a second?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
4
and 4 years. Yeah, well, I was pregnant with my 4th, and
Oh my
just
gosh.
under 5 years. So we had 4 boys, and so.
Do you know what causes that?
Yeah. we know.
She's figured it out.
Yes. Yeah, that last one, we were like, okay,
We
we're
got
done
it.
for a while. Yeah. And we just kind of, I got to a point where I was exhausted, and we were also discovering, we found out later, but my oldest is ADHD and very OCD. He's gotten better, but at that age, he was very OCD, and our personalities were clashing, and it was just a hard school time. And so my husband and I kind of reassessed. We were like, what is best for the family right now? And you guys are wearing each other out, so what is best for your relationship with your son? And so thankfully, God just kind of provided. There was a private school, a Christian private school nearby that had a huge amount of money. And so basically, scholarship was free for that year. He got to go to the private school for free. So we did that for 2 years. We went to private school. And then we couldn't afford it anymore. The scholarship money ran out. And so brought him home, was planning on homeschooling. And then there was an extended family crisis that I really needed to really focus a lot of my emotion and energy on. And so my husband and I again prayed about it, reassessed, and decided that for his third grade and my second son's second grade year, they would go to public school. And so they went to public school for a year. And then after that, we felt God calling to say, okay, it's time to all come home. And I felt in a really good place, and I could take it on. So
It sounds like both of you had really great support, with your decision to homeschool. You're giving a smirk, Donna. Was it not so supportive?
He's never not been supportive,
Okay.
but he never didn't not challenge me either. So
That's such a good way to put that. I'm going to use that.
in all kindness to my loving husband. A lot like what Elena describes. It's always, how's your relationship with, your kiddo on the other side of you? Because it is challenging. Like your teacher and your mom and the principal is at work, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you get into battles that were just hard.
Yeah.
And he would often only see the hard, whereas we're living day to day in the victory, and we get to see the small little things that went right. And so I always had to tell him, just trust me, it's fine.
Sure.
And, it's nice to see the win in it.
For sure. And it's neat that you both have sons in college right now. Like you've brought, that is a big win in that, is that you both have graduated sons into college and they're doing well and they're thriving, and that's good. Yeah. Two things I want to make sure we get into that I have been rattling around in my brain since you both started talking. So I'm going to throw them out there and then we can kind of work around those. But Elena, you kind of mentioned learning disabilities or learning, or just some learning challenges, right, with ADHD, and I know dyslexia is a big one out there, dysgraphia. There's all kinds of learning challenges out there for kids. I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on what does that look like. How do you? Is there curriculum specifically that you guys have worked with for that you would say, oh, we maybe should list those resources somewhere? Or are there ways that you've taken curriculum and adjusted it or made those accommodations for them? So I'd love to hit on that. And then, sorry, just getting this out so we don't forget. Also, what did you do with your little ones? Like, how do you manage the different ages of people that you are homeschooling, different grades, different personality, all of that together, right? So young and old together. So 2 things I'm throwing out there. Go. Whoever wants to take either one of those.
So I'll let Elena speak to the wide range in ages because mine 2 are 19 months apart. So for the most part, I saved myself and kept them relatively close in almost everything.
That was probably helpful.
That I could.
Yeah.
As far as learning disabilities, I always tell other homeschool parents, the school system that you pay into still has services that you can qualify for, so seek them out. And then just because a curriculum, for example, with a kid with dyslexia says you must, read this book. Well, thank God for books on tape. Let them listen to it, read along to them, read aloud to them, let them follow along while you read it to them. Come up with what works for them and don't be afraid to accommodate them. But seek the specialist that's there for you, that can advocate for you and get the services that you need so that you can be the best teacher at home. But don't give up on a dream or a call on your life because it's a roadblock, it's a stepping stone, or it's something that you have to get over instead of just giving up altogether.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
I like that. Do you have anything on that? Or
Yeah, I want to go back to when you were talking about, you had mentioned, what was the thing you had asked before those 2 questions we were answering?
Danny, that's what you're here for.
Girl.
You're my memory.
James and I were just talking about he's the one with the bad memory. I can't join the club now. One of us has to have a good memory, and I'm like, I'm failing.
It was about
the disability.
No, before that, if you feel called, not if you feel called. It was what popped in my head was sometimes one spouse will feel very convicted and feel that nudge and have a very strong desire to want to do it, and the other spouse is like, heck no, what are you thinking? And so for that situation, man, I get it. We've been there on different things for sure. And I know that one thing is for sure, if God is moved in my heart, then I know he can move in my husband's heart, or vice versa. And so it's not my job to move him or get them there. That's the Lord's job. And so just to patiently wait, that just because God calls, like when God told Abraham, your wife's going to have a son, he was called to wait, even though his wife was like, what, that's crazy. And so he was called to wait and just have the faith. So just wait and have the faith. And just tell God, like, Lord, I feel like you're doing this. So if you want this to happen, you're going to have to move in my spouse's heart, not me. Like, it's going to have to be you making that heart change, not me forcing it. So
Right.
I remember so Molly, my oldest, was in first grade in the public school district. And it was just an off year. It was such a big class. They had 23 students in there, and it was in a little cubicle, it was a portable building. And she was so meek and just quiet and shy, and there were all sorts of kids in that class and one teacher. And this teacher had such a big voice. Well, Molly started stuttering mid-year, just stressed out. And James and I were like, what are we going to do? Because at that point, I thought homeschooling was just for, awkward people.
Right. Right. You should throw that out there.
People that are awkward
Yes.
or pregnant too early or,
Yes.
Any of that stuff. I'm like, what do we do?
Four
We have to
babies,
move?
just spit babies out.
And we need to mention that you've been homeschooling for a while, so I love that you're getting here. Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes.
we were talking to some friends at church who we had no idea they homeschooled because we were like, these are such cool people. And then we found out they homeschooled and we're like,
Cool and
what?
homeschool.
I know,
Love that.
right?
And so
actually
they're like,
happened.
you should totally homeschool. And I'm like, that's so cool. Like, who's going to do it?
I don't wear a long skirt and have my hair in a bun, Danny.
I mean, the whole thing was just like, I'm not going to do that. You could, like, who are you looking at? And then after a while, it did feel like it was going to be me. And I'm
It's
like,
gonna be me.
what in the world? But we totally did. And the first year was rough. It was hard because my mother was a veteran public school teacher, and I'd only known public school.
Right.
Our family had only, and it was just like, wait, what are you doing? And my whole family was just like, we're going to have to disagree, and it was just, we had zero support. James was very supportive.
Good.
But now, I won't say zero support, but it was just like, you can do that, but I'm not sure we're on board.
It's the right choice.
And we felt like we were just messing stuff up. But
Sure.
we just felt like we were between a rock and a hard place. And so we just went for it. Totally, that first year, I tried to do all the things. I was like, social studies, science, history. And I was doing every subject, like, I got to keep up. I got to do all these things and keep a chart. And Molly was in the first grade.
Yes.
They're hard.
Yes.
She's like, Mom, can I get back to public school?
I
Homeschool's
know.
hard.
I mean, she thought she was stuttering
Yeah.
and crying in public school. She was just like,
Now she's in the corner.
Dad
we
would
don't
get
know
home
what
and she'd be like, Daddy!
Nothing like
Bless her
breaking that
heart.
kid down over a first grade science
Yes.
experiment,
Oh, it's
right?
such a fail.
Been there.
But
been
luckily,
there.
I met moms just like you guys who had actually, they were doing it for these other reasons, and they were like, no, I enjoy my child. I actually want to get to know my kid. I
Right,
want them to love learning, and this is what we do. And it was like, oh, it doesn't have to be this rigorous, keep up with tax test kind of thing. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
And so I have a daughter who's dyslexic.
Okay.
And trying to keep up with the reading curriculum for her age level, and even some of the stuff that was in her math was just causing tears.
Okay.
And so we completely changed curriculums. And then we do a lot of books on tape. We do a lot of Audible. And it's just night and day. She follows along. She highlights.
Wow.
And it's okay. It's
That
like
is so
totally
great.
fine. And she loves it. She loves reading her books now.
And she probably feels empowered and like
She
she's thriving.
does.
Like I actually have some mastery or
Yeah.
she may not be using those terms, but just that the feeling of I can do this
Right.
will carry her in so many other ways. Just
Right.
having that back.
Right.
The back.
Yeah. But now we do have
Awesome.
great support. Everybody is totally on board. But what I was wondering, I do know that there are some parents out there that have older kids that have been in the school system, and for whatever reason, they're like, I want to pull them out. I want to homeschool, but we're so far gone.
What do we do about high school math? That's
Yes,
my one
yeah.
question. What did you do about high school math? Or how do
Right.
you handle high school science? And the answer is you find the professional who's great at it.
Yeah.
So we,
Or the curriculum that has
Yes.
really good support. They have online tutors,
Yes.
or they have a company that can come, like you can access anytime to say, hey, I'm tripping up over this particular concept. Like, can
Right.
you walk me through it? And they'll meet on the phone.
Yeah.
Or,
So we've used a math curriculum in particular for a long time that was online, homeschool, dad recognized. There's a lot of great techniques, but not a lot of great ways to develop those one-on-one. And so it's like an online lecture, online mastery. But that's where one of those places where you get the support of, like, for my husband, he's an engineer. If you can't handle, like,
Right.
coming behind me and teaching him math, but don't let it be the thing that keeps you from doing what you want to do. And science is much the same way. And especially for my science nerd kids, I was never great at science, but I sure learned a lot learning it with my kids. And that was where that humility aspect comes in, where you can't be afraid to say, I can't remember. I had a fantastic chemistry teacher in high school, but he was so smart. He taught over me, and I never learned much from Mr. Arnold. Sorry, Mr. Arnold. But
She totally threw us.
because
Yeah.
I still love him. Actually, coincidentally, his brother is best friends with my mother-in-law and father-in-law, so it's so strange. But anyway, so I would just learn right along with them. And some days I would be frustrated because I couldn't get a concept that I really wanted to learn with my kids. So, don't be afraid. Just jump in.
I love
and
that.
I took a different approach. I was like, I can't handle math. Shane, husband,
Yes.
you're doing math. Like,
Yeah.
you got to do the math because I'm lacking in that.
Right.
And so I could handle the other stuff, but the math.
Yeah, I can
do
imagine there are a lot of good resources out there. I know Khan Academy is another
Absolutely.
good one for
Oh,
so many
absolutely.
subjects, and it's free, but I know there are math tutors. Do you know of any tutors, you don't have to mention them by name, we could put those in the link in the bio, but that will do tutoring? Like, in the homeschooling realm, are there ways that you can access, like, a math tutor without accessing the actual curriculum or program that goes along with it? Do you know of anything
I don't
like
know
that?
any off the top of my
Okay.
head, but I know that there are so many homeschool Facebook pages. You can literally go on and say, hey, is there a student a couple years ahead of my
Oh,
son
that's good.
who would be interested in working a little bit, making a little bit of money
Sure.
to tutor? And they're more than happy
That's great advice.
to
I like
work.
that.
So my daughter also has disabilities. She has central auditory processing disorder and social pragmatic communication disorder, which it kind of looks like very similar to being on the spectrum.
Okay.
And they're not, it's very gray area, so they haven't quite decided if that is on the spectrum, if it's not, if it's just similar to the spectrum. So, but in trying to school her for a couple years, and it seemed like it would take, for an example, it took her 10 weeks to learn the continents and the oceans. And we were doing songs, and we were doing maps, and we were doing hands-on, we were doing the visual and the tactile, the puzzles, and
It just wasn't sticking.
it just was not. It took
Yeah.
10 weeks to get, and that's how it's been for her with everything. It's been it usually takes her about 3 months to grasp a concept, and then we finally move on, start learning a new concept, and we go back and review, and it's completely gone.
Okay.
So that was our struggle.
Sure.
And after 2 years of beating my head against a wall, I just was like, I can't do this. We need help. And so we decided to put her in public school. We did public school for about 1.5 years. And we live in a smaller town, so the school was starting to grow. The city was growing in such a way that the school hadn't quite caught up to the size that they needed. And so she just wasn't getting the state support that we were hoping she would get. So they put her in a regular classroom at the regular classroom pace, and her teacher was meeting with me saying, I see what you see, but the ARD meetings, the ARD people were not. And so they were kind of like, the teacher just kept telling me, just wait, I promise by 3rd grade, they will start to see it. Everyone will start to see it. And I'm like, but what about in the meantime while
Right.
she's struggling and being
Right.
made fun of in the classroom setting because she can't socially engage the way that, so there was just a lot of the things that I was hoping she would get the support for, she wasn't.
Okay.
And all the things that I was concerned she would pick up, like the whispering and gossiping and telling secrets about other kids, all that stuff, she was picking up. And it's very hard to help a person who has disabilities to help them understand the difference and to see why that's not okay. And she just has a hard time processing all that. And it was so much more work when she would come home from school to detox from the day, that I was like, this is not helping.
Sure.
This is worse than she was at home. So
trying to undo the negative behaviors.
Yeah. Exactly.
While missing the positive, right.
So we again decided to pull her out, and I was like, this home's got to be better than this situation. So we pulled her home, and for a year struggled through it, and then we found a 2-day academy that has done wonders for her. And additionally, I will say this, do not feel like you have to stay at pace. The great thing about homeschooling is that you can teach until it's mastered. And so if they haven't mastered something, don't move on. Like I learned real quick that, you know what, she's not ready to move on to 4th grade. So we had already held her back 1 year in kindergarten. And so in 3rd grade, I made the call. I was like, she's going to do 3rd grade over again. So she's been held back 2 years. And for the first time in she's technically would be going into 6th grade. So she's in 4th grade, or she would be in 6th grade. So she's in 4th grade. And for the first time, she is thriving.
That's awesome.
She's bringing home good grades and proud of it.
Yeah.
She's able to draw things that as a 6th grader, like she's drawing at a 4th grade, 3rd grade level. Whereas a 6th grader, she would have felt like inadequate all the time, comparing herself to the other kids and saying, I can't do what they're doing. I can't read at the pace they're reading. I can't learn what they're learning. And we learned that she is behind, and that's okay to hold her back and to say, you know what, you're just not ready.
Yeah.
I can imagine it takes a lot of humility as a parent to admit, that we need help, because you both mentioned, asking for help when you need help, but also that your kid, your child, as hard as they're working, may not be at the pace of someone else, and accepting that is okay. Every child is individual. We're all, as humans, individual, and have our own.
Now, for the
especially
rest of
when
us,
people thought, like, in the public school, well, they didn't see a problem with her. They thought, well, you homeschooled her. That's the problem. That was the problem, is that, well, you didn't know what you were doing and you haven't educated her the right way. And there were certainly some people, not everyone, but there were certainly some people that had conversations with me that alluded to that very strongly. And so it was very humbling, and I really had to go on a journey with God and be like, am I lacking? Am I not what she needs? Am I not capable? Could I do this? Can I not do this at home? Do I need more support? All of those questions, and
the questions that we all ask ourselves.
Absolutely.
Like, regardless of whether we're schooling at home or sending our kids to public school, we all are asking ourselves those questions constantly.
I've had a similar experience. So I mentioned earlier that we had taken a 2-year time and put the kids into a half-day charter school, and my oldest fell behind. He had gotten extremely ill that year and missed 20 days of school before February. And so the pressure was on from the teachers, you got to pass the tax test. Or I think it was still the tax test, and I don't think it was the STAR yet. But there was no way that I was going to catch him up, and so we brought him back home and went back at it. And it took me until 6th grade to realize that he had so many gaps in his education. And so the only place that his grade mattered was at church. And so we just said, you know what, we're just going to make the decision now. And we held him back a year in junior high, and he's thriving now because of it. And he was that summer birthday kid, so, nobody's the wiser. But it's hard as a parent to think, well, what did I do that I could have done better?
Sure.
Versus just recognizing I'm doing what I think is best for my kid and advocating for him, and then seeing that it was worth it. Yeah.
And then there's always, you can take your kids and have them tested in the public school system to find out. I've done that 2 different times. One, when they were going into public school that year for my 2 boys, they needed to know, are they at level? And they were actually, my 3rd grader was actually at a 6th grade level, and my 1st grader was at a 3rd grade level. So they were both far ahead.
Sure.
Which was it was reassuring to me. I was like, okay.
I'm doing something right.
I was, because I was constantly second guessing myself. What am I missing? Are they not learning? Am I forgetting anything? Are we going to have holes and gaps? And then in my son's my 2 boys' 9th and 8th grade years, I sent them off to public school to take the PSAT, because I just was we're not even going to study for it. I just want y'all to take it to see where y'all are at and what holes and gaps there are, again, that we need to start focusing on. And without studying at all for it, they both scored right around almost 1,100. So I was like, we're good.
Well, I will be calling your sons to come tutor my precious children.
I can't. It goes back to that. I can't take any credit. Like, they love to learn, so they really have just absorbed. Like, what can I learn next? What can I learn next?
That's great. They're sponges.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking about with disabilities is, for so many parents out there, they are terrified of even bringing them home because they're like, I don't have the patience for that. There's no way I have patience.
Oh, that's what I was gonna.
I can't deal with that all day and then have them in the evening and, sending them to school as a break.
Yep,
so what would you say to that?
Yeah, that's good.
Do you guys have a mountain of patience? Is that why you homeschool?
And if you do, could you please share that?
That would not be on the list of my virtues. There isn't a human who knows me well who would say, you have all the patience in the world. No, I do not.
And when you have a learning disability or even physical.
I know I can't speak to the disability because we were fortunate that just was not the situation with my kids. And my kids are not, homeschool parents kind of find themselves in one of two avenues, right? That their kids are really brilliant, right? You have like all of these exceptionally smart and gifted. If you ever go Google homeschooling, your kid was a concert pianist at the age of 11 and is graduating from college at 15 and whatever. And you're like, not mine. Or it's this whole other side of it where, well, your kid just must be weird, right? You must be really awkward. Well, if you've met my kids, they're not awkward in the slightest. They're just normal kids.
Sure.
They're just normal. And so it's just perseverance. Like, you just have to recognize that maybe today is not the day that it's going to go well for me. This was not our day.
Mm-hmm. Each day's a new day.
Thank God each day's a new day. And so you just have to recognize that, well, maybe I'll win tomorrow.
The Lord would always bring to mind, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another, that proverb. And he would always remind me, like, I have put these little people in your life to grow you. Mm-hmm. Like, you're getting an education too, little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to recognize that they're bettering me. They're causing me to be humble, because not perfect by any means, but the times every day when I fail, to humble myself and go to them and say, you know what? Mommy lost her patience. Mm-hmm. You know what? Mommy spoke very ugly to you, was short with you, irritable with you,
right?
Or, whatever it is.
Sure.
And that was absolutely wrong of me. Will you please forgive me? And so those character building moments that they get to witness and they get to see modeled all throughout the day is so beautiful. And I would almost say, if you feel like you have all the patience in the world, then your kids are missing out on that humility aspect. If you aren't losing it and screaming or crying or stressing,
I like that.
Yeah. Yes. Then those kids are missing seeing you human and seeing your dependency on Christ and seeing you turn towards the Lord and saying, Lord, I cannot do this in my own strength.
Right.
And they're watching you.
And just asking for forgiveness too.
Yes.
Like you said, owning when we've messed up and asking for their forgiveness for that.
I mean, I think the two words I probably have said the most as a homeschool mom is I'm sorry. Because Elena's right, you have to learn to ask for forgiveness from your kids, because you are not going to get it right. You're going to mess it up. I am appreciative now that my kids are 19 and almost 18, that if you ask them, who's your mom, they're going to be able to give you an honest answer. Like, they know who I am in so many respects that they otherwise wouldn't get to know, because we walked this journey for so long together. And I have a relationship with them that I cherish because they've put up with me for all of these years.
And they know each other. When I think
that's
to
neat.
My kids are the best of friends.
Yeah, we were completely separated. We were in school all day and then athletics the rest of the day and into the evening youth groups. And so we just didn't get that part.
Which
of
sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder. So I guess it's okay either way, because sometimes siblings might need that space and to kind of come back in together. On siblings really fast before because I know we could talk all day, I think,
Sure.
about all of
All day.
this. But real quick, do you have any tips that we haven't mentioned on, schooling multiple ages of kids at home at the same time? Like time management, or how do you, do you give more time to the child that needs it the most? Or did you find yourself more in the camp of everyone gets a certain amount of my time? Like, how did you work that out? Specifically you, Elena, who had not 8 kids, 6 kids.
Ages all over.
Yes.
Block scheduling is great. So once I got my mind around the difference between scheduling and then block scheduling, which is basically like the first few years I was like, at 8 we're going to this subject, at 8:45 we'll do this subject, at 9:15 we'll do this subject, and it was stressful to try to stick to that.
Yeah.
And I would set timers and I would like rewards and all this stuff, and I was like, okay, this isn't working. So
Right.
then I discovered block timing, which is more like, hey, it'll take you about 45 minutes to do math. So wherever you can fit it in the day, just take a chunk of 45 minutes and get math done. Like, it's so much more freeing and relaxing to be able to do it. Or spelling will take 20 minutes. So let's knock out spelling real quick before lunch. You kind of you get an idea of how long the subjects will take. And all of my kids, by the time they were, most of them second grade, but definitely by third grade, were self-teaching. So I could pretty much say, here's the teacher manual, here's the student workbook, or here's the
Wow.
teacher
Okay,
instructional
that blows
DVD.
my mind.
Nope, not mine.
Learn.
So keep
That's-
going.
Yeah, that blows my mind right there. I'm
And
like,
so-
ooh, that's, can't even imagine that.
So they would go off, and then I would just
Okay.
focus on the kindergartner, first and second grader. Like,
Okay.
I would focus on them. And then, the older ones would come to me and say, hey, Mom, I'm stumped on this, or I don't understand this. And so I
Yeah.
would definitely, you felt like you were ping-ponging, because it's like, hold on just a minute, work on writing these words, let me work on him, and you feel like you're...
See, kinder,
But
I
it's-
totally mastered. I was so good
Oh,
at that.
Oh, I
see,
bet
you were.
Like,
of
right,
all the
really
ones,
good.
That was the
I
one
could
I
do
failed.
Coloring,
Yes,
the alphabet.
right, the coloring and
Yes,
sorting.
that's
I might
me.
could handle that.
You talk time management, and that's the one thing that is great about the concept of homeschooling, something that you really can get your kids to grasp, because unlike, public school, it's first period and then the bell rings, and then you go to second period and then the bell rings, right? You're marching to somebody else's time.
True.
And so when we homeschool, you have to learn the concept of time management. And so unlike Elena's overachieving children,
She's in that top echelon
Right.
of, brilliant
and I know we're
students.
kids, so I can
Yeah.
say that, and I love them to death.
They're great.
Mine had to have time management just drilled into them. And so even to the point where when my oldest was just a senior, which is last year, folks, I was like, this kid's just sunk. Like, he's going to go to school, and it's never going to happen for him. But all I kept doing is, these are the tools that I can give you, and it's up to him whether or not he's going to use them. And so he's using them. Now, is he using them great? No. Has he called me a couple times and been like, yeah, I messed that up. I need to be better at it. Like the fancy paper planner that, I sent him with that he didn't use until he missed an assignment kind of thing. But they learn it.
Yeah.
So it's not a one size fits all. Like, I want them to have this. I want to equip them to know how to do this. And it might just take them a while to get there. And that's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, for
You're not
sure.
a more terrible teacher or mom because your kid took 5 times as long to
Right.
get
Right.
something.
Or made mistakes. I mean, you mentioned
Yes.
failing too. Like, I
Yes.
think we discredit that and think,
Yeah.
oh, they're doing well if they're not making mistakes. But we know there's so much to
There.
learn in mistakes, and guiding them through how to fix them or how to just learn from those and grow.
Absolutely.
Well, and the last
Absolutely.
thing I want to mention is just, what do your kids do for fun? How do they get to know other kids? That's what I get asked all the time.
Social,
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Is that
Yes.
Are
social?
they
What about
social, or is it like
socialization?
quarantine all year? Do they just sit and look at the walls and do schoolwork all day? Watch, what's the guy? The
So-
science guy or something.
So we just lock
Bill
them in
Nye.
the room and leave them for the day, and then come back out at the end of the day and get them.
Right.
So when my kids were super young, they were Boy Scouts, of course, and then they were both competitive gymnasts, and so that pretty well swallowed us whole for a long time. And so that was their socialization outside of the house, was to go work out for 25 hours a week, flipping around, or however many ridiculous hours it was. But they got their biggest outlet from, their church family. I mean, that was what was their driving force. I mean, we did we did a homeschool community for a couple years, and it was at a time when they really needed it. We were transition between competitive sports and just being at home. So it was one of those situations where you can almost overwhelm yourself with so many options, and we just did what was for them, what they wanted to do, what they felt comfortable with. And so that was never an area where we lack.
And great that they both did the same thing. So you weren't like,
that worked
over here, drop off here.
No, they pretty well are two peas in a pod.
That's great.
Yeah.
So,
And we kind of told our kids, we have too many, so you get one thing, and you're all doing that one thing. And it helped that we had so many boys at the beginning because it was like soccer. That's what y'all are doing. So they played soccer on a league, and
they made up half the team.
Just played in the backyard, and people came over and watched. It was amazing.
no, I mean, we lived in a neighborhood, so they'd go outside and they'd play with the kids on the street, and they would invite
and I
over
know
to
your
other
family
people's houses.
too. We've known you guys for a long time, and service has been a huge part of your family.
Yes.
And you guys, your kids are amazing at. They have huge servant hearts, and your boys work hard too, and so they.
Right now we're hitting those teen years, and so it's definitely more begrudging. But
it's okay. They can have feelings. Their feelings don't always have to line up with what they're doing, right?
Absolutely.
So
we're
we're
working
in my
through
life.
that.
Yeah.
They have to fail in some area.
Yeah.
Okay,
Man,
give us
they,
a bone.
they do.
They're
They fail.
kids.
My son is he called from college, and he was like, "Hey, I'm actually using a calendar, and I'm like loving it." And they're like, "We only tried for like 3 years
I
in
know.
high school to get you to put it on a calendar."
Amen.
Yeah, but
And it's probably because some cute girl in class was using a calendar.
So true. That is so true. That other motivation.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
no,
good.
what was the question?
I don't even know what we're talking about.
We lost track.
To wrap up, is there anything, because this has been an incredible conversation,
Well, you
and I
had
think
asked
super
a
helpful.
while back how to help do littles,
Yes.
and we never really touched on that.
That'd be great.
So
Tips.
I know there are so many different styles out there. There are some moms that need to be more free, and I liked having a routine and a schedule. So for my toddlers and young little ones, we had schedules, and so we had breakfast around a certain time. I wasn't legalistic, but characteristically, we stuck to a routine. Mm-hmm. And so, breakfast at a certain time, and the baby would or the toddler would either sit in a high chair and have books, or have a basket of toys that I would only allow during school times, things that they wouldn't get to have during the rest of the day. From like playpen time, we'd have a playpen out on the back patio in the shade, and they loved being outside, so they could play outside while we were doing a subject, and just constantly moving them around, but keeping them distracted / entertained / educated as well.
With novel experiences, something new that you would only do like during
school
that
time.
That's great.
So something that they looked forward to, and then having that morning, we called it room time, and that was where you go play. When they got to 2 years old, it was like, you go play in your room with the door closed for an hour.
Yep.
Do not come out. Like, we had to train them. Like, this is time where you stay in your room.
Yes.
Mommy's going to get schooling done with the little, so with
Love
vigor.
room time.
So.
Yeah.
So that was
I
a
want
huge
room
help. And then nap time in the afternoons was a huge help. And we just kind of worked school around what
good.
worked. If we had to go this morning, we had to go to the dentist. So I was like, everyone grab a reader, grab a subject, take it with you. And while we're in the waiting room or sitting in the car now because of COVID, we'll do a subject. So
How many hours of school were done in your family car?
Or in waiting rooms.
Oh, yeah.
Discount tire waiting
Hours.
rooms.
Yes.
Doctors waiting rooms.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, probably ER waiting rooms.
absolutely.
for you guys.
A few of those with as many kids and boys.
So anyway, just wanted to touch on that.
Thank
I
you
love
for
that.
coming back to that.
That is helpful. And we did kind of the same thing where we would have a little Tupperware box of just manipulatives that, my youngest Nash had never doesn't get to play with until it's time for me to sit down with the girls when he was younger. And that was huge because all of a sudden he was just like, oh, and he was, doing that. And we actually had a minute to work on stuff without him and his diaper, like taking it off and, swinging it around. I mean, he had some shenanigans.
The fact that we can all see him doing that
Yes,
is
right?
what's hilarious. I'm like, oh, Nash.
I know.
That's awesome.
Oh, love it. Love it.
That's so good. Well, this conversation, like I said, has been amazing. Thank you, both of you, so much for just taking the time out of your schedules to come out and impart some helpful wisdom to
I hope
us
there was a
moms.
fraction of a nugget that somebody might take out of.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything else before we end that has popped into your brain that you're like, oh, we have to say this before we go?
Yeah, so I
Okay.
know that we had talked about this, speaking to the parents who are in the virtual school or school at home, like where you're finding yourself in a situation where I never wanted to homeschool and I don't even know what to do, and they're home all day. What is the things that we would tell them about what their day should look like, right? What are our nuggets of advice? And I know for myself, it's you don't have to replicate your public school classroom in your house. Stay off of Pinterest. Don't look at what everybody else is doing and thinking that they have to sit at this desk for 8 hours a day and do all of the things exactly like that. It's okay to let them go where they need to go and learn the way that they need to learn. And if that's laying on their stomach in their bed, let them do it.
Yes.
Let them do it, because that's not a battle that you want to necessarily have to pick with your kid. And then when it comes to, I don't understand what they're learning, learn it with them. Humble yourself enough and sit down with them and learn it with them.
That's good.
And figure it out. And I know it's hard for those moms and dads that are like balancing work and their kids at home, and this was not a season that they ever thought that they would find themselves in. But I probably learned more schooling my kids than I learned in my own schooling as, kindergarten through 12th grade. So because it's things that you just don't think about. And so it's okay to sit alongside of them and learn it with them and figure it out together. And then to say, I don't know. Like, that's okay.
I don't know, but
Like,
let's figure it out.
let's figure it out together.
Yep. And I think just going back to that, it doesn't have to be like you don't have to keep pace with public school or implement public school. Just this last week, my 6-year-old, we were doing spelling, and while I was putting tiles up on the whiteboard for his spelling for things, and I would ask him the key concepts that we had been reviewing, and he was literally like rolling. This was in a bedroom. He was rolling off the bed onto the floor and jumping on the bed, off onto the floor and onto the bed, like over and over and over. And the adult female in me wanted to be like, would you just sit still?
Right.
And I had to pull myself back and stop myself and say, you know what? He is a little boy full of wiggles and wriggles and wildness, and he's engaged.
Yeah.
I hear him retaining. I hear him, responding, and so let him learn that way. And it's been that way. I had one of my boys who liked to stand on his chair and do his work bent over at the table while standing. So that was like when he got restless, he would stand up on his chair and bend over and do it that way. And we would go outside, and I would grill vocabulary words while they jumped on the trampoline and just get them. Sometimes they can't sit still all day, every day. They need to move and wiggle. So
That's
it's
great.
okay to let them.
Yeah.
They're not going to grow up and be weird adults, because there is an age, it does come where they begin to sit still.
Sure.
I think for so many young moms, especially starting out with young ones, I know I'm guilty of this. I don't know about everyone, but I look way down the road, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if they aren't getting this now, then this is going to happen, and then it's going to lead to this, and they're going to be adults that are like this.
Right.
And
So I've already failed before I begin.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so I think just to breathe,
Yeah.
simmer down, and especially now being on the end where I have one off out of the home, I wish so much I wouldn't have stressed out about things that I stressed out
Absolutely.
about.
Advice.
To know that there's grace in it all, and God is bigger than our mistakes and our foul ups, and always have humility, like we talked about, to just say, you know what, Mommy lost her patience, and it's okay. Because sometimes I'll be like, I'm so contradicting myself all the time, where they're like, well, the last week you said I couldn't do that. And I'm like, you know what? I know. I'm changing the plan because I realized that was silly of Mommy. Like, my expectations are too high for you. And so we're going to change it. And sometimes I'm like, am I confusing them? Am I stressing them out? Am I causing more anxiety? Because it's like, you're constantly changing what you say. And so just to know, I'm human, bud. Like, I'm sorry. I know. I'm
Right.
trying
You're
to figure this out
flexible.
with you.
Yeah.
So.
And you're validating their feelings, too, that
Yeah.
they probably felt by saying, hey, I recognize that last week when I said that, it might have made you feel like I wasn't listening or I didn't care about, but I've rethought it.
Yes.
And now, and so it helps, validate. That's the word I was looking for, validate their feelings.
Two other things I wanted to say was, especially for those who have kids thrust into their home forcefully, and they're like, this whole video virtual thing, and my kids are around me all day, every day, and I've had it. My patience is gone. I don't get any space. I totally get it. It took me years to learn a schedule that worked for me to get my bucket filled, my.
Because that's important.
Yeah. And so I get it. But when you're in the throes of just surviving, don't forget to check in on your kids. I think sometimes we get so busy like checking the academic boxes because they're at home that we don't check on their heart box. And so say, how are you doing? How is it going? Or we're so busy saying, correcting, that we don't encourage and to say, hey, you know what? I'm really proud of the way that you handled that situation. You were struggling in that, and I watched you persevere through it, and I'm so proud of you. Or even though you struggled through it, and I watched an attitude change in the midst of it, and I'm so proud of you. Or, hey, bud, thanks for cleaning up your mess when I asked you to do it. Or just whatever you can find, just pour compliments into them, because I promise you they need it so much, because they feel like they feel like they aren't doing anything right. They're struggling with all the virtual schooling.
Yeah.
So just pour in those compliments and write little notes that stick them on their screen before they go in. Just try to think of creative ways to love on them and pour into them. And then for those that homeschool or are finding themselves wanting to do this in the long run, definitely, I think Danny touched on this in the last podcast, but take one-on-one times. Take them out for coffee. Take them out for tea or for a breakfast taco or whatever, and just find out how their heart is, how they're doing, and say, as a homeschool mom, what is it like to be on the other side of me? How am I doing?
It's a big question.
What can I work on?
Yeah.
Do you feel like I'm hard on you? Do you feel like I conditionally love? Do you feel like where are we at, and what do I need to work on? And to always be open to that. So
it's good. Thank you so much for all of that.
Welcome.
Both of you. Well, this is great. I really appreciate your time. And
well, we haven't arrived, right? I think that's a big North Point. I love that saying. We haven't arrived.
Right.
We haven't perfected it. We're still learning.
Run from any homeschool mom who tells you that she's got it figured out.
I just love you guys sharing with us, being raw and filtered, letting us know what your journey's been like, and helping maybe some of those moms at home who are struggling with some of the same questions, or even, getting excited about thinking about homeschooling. So.
Absolutely. And we're always happy. I mean, if there are people that reach out and they're like, hey, I have more questions, I'd love to go out for coffee or talk over the phone or whatever they're comfortable with doing.
Absolutely.
So
We
don't
your
go
cell
through
phone numbers out. I'm just kidding. We will post them in the link in our bio.
Yeah. I mean, we don't go through all of this to not share what we've learned, right?
Absolutely.
If we can't walk out on the other side of it and give some nuggets of truth and some help to somebody else who one day might need it, we've kind of wasted our journey, right?
Well, we appreciate it.
Beautiful.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.